Hey now, Steve Stevens for Bionic Buzz. We're here at Art's Radio Dream Launch 10th anniversary here at Steve Resnik's Rock and Roll Mansion. The event features many icons in the radio and record industry, so let's go see who we can talk to. All right, Steve, how many times have you hosted Radio Dream Launch here?
This is about the fourth. I think it's the fourth.
Cool. Well, here at Bionic Buzz, as you know, we're all about people's passion. Where did your passion for music come from, especially collecting? Because you have the big rock and roll museum here that you've been collecting over so many years. Where did that begin?
Well, when I was a little kid in the 50s, I'd be in the back of my parents' car with my little sister, and we'd be listening to my parents' radio station, which was Eddie Fisher, Perry Como, Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Doris Day. And the music was okay. It was kind of boring. It was no big deal. And all of a sudden, it wasn't overnight, but it seemed like it was overnight that it went from those artists to Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, Fats Domino, the Everly Brothers, Roy Orbison, Elvis Presley, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just thought it was the greatest thing that ever happened, how music was just okay, and all of a sudden it was unbelievable.
Nice.
And my fellow classmates in school liked it as well, but not as much as I did. I just thought it was the greatest thing. And for the first couple of years of rock and roll, there'd be reverends and priests and rabbis on the radio, on TV, on the news, often saying, "Don't worry, parents, this horrible thing called rock and roll will make it go away." And my dad was almost a rabbi, so I thought they had the power to do it. He used to bring reverends and priests over for lunch and dinner at our house, and I got to know them and realized they were kind of powerful. And maybe they could really do this and get rid of rock and roll. And then my parents made me take piano lessons, and the first thing the piano teacher said was, "Let me teach you only 8 notes, an octave. All you really need to know is if you know an octave, you'll learn how to play piano. Let me show you an octave, because every song there's ever been, and every song there will ever be, came from these 8 notes." And so I said to him, because remember, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, I'm scared to death rock and roll is going to go away for one reason. Now I'm thinking it's going to go away for another reason, because I looked at him and said, every song there's ever been and every song that there will ever be came from these 8 notes on the piano. And he says, yeah. And I said, aren't they going to run out of ideas pretty soon? No, I actually said, aren't they going to run out of possibilities pretty soon?
Yeah.
And that scared me. Now there's 2 reasons why rock and roll is not going to make it and not going to live on. Yeah. And I said, I'm just going to collect everything I possibly can. About a year later, I bought my 4th single I ever bought, and it was by the Del Vikings, "Come Go With Me." And half a year later, I was up in Michigan because my great-great-great-grandparents back in 1915, along with 80 other Jewish families on the north side of Chicago, bought summer cottages up in Michigan. So my first 14 or 15 years before we moved here as a 15-year-old, I spent every summer, not in Chicago where I lived, but in Michigan on the beaches, living like Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. It was the greatest summers I ever had, with the sand dunes, a private beach, little cottages. They weren't, nobody was rich, but we had beautiful little cottages. And it was the greatest time. We'd wake up when we felt like it. We walked the dirt roads like a John Denver song. We went to the beach. It was the most beautiful beach. There were beaches like Hawaii. They were just gorgeous and wonderful. But at night, because we were out in the middle of nowhere, 100 miles north of Chicago, and because AM radio, which of course was everything back then, traveled great distances at night. They weren't as good a quality as FM. That's why everything went to FM. And FM doesn't travel long distances. But AM radio, WLS in Chicago, would go to 30 states at night. And they were the #1 station in so many markets. Anyway, my cousin and I, because rock and roll wasn't heard on very many stations, when everybody went to sleep at 11 o'clock at night, we'd play with the radio, just turning it real slowly, trying to pick up radio stations. And all of a sudden, we picked up stations in Akron, in Canton, in Cleveland, in Buffalo, in Rochester, in Kansas City, in Minneapolis, Chicago, and all the suburbs like Lansing and Battle Creek and Muskegon, and where Notre Dame is, South Bend. We were picking up all these stations, all on the dial. Some better quality than others, but we picked them all up. And all of a sudden, we heard a song that was the follow-up to the Del Vikings that I had bought a half a year before, called "Whispering Bells." And my cousin and I heard it, and well, that's just as good as "Come Go With Me." Wow. A couple nights later, we heard it again, maybe on the same station, who knows. And then summer was over. 4 months later, then summer was over, and I go back to Chicago with my family, but my cousin lived in Kalamazoo. He was my dad was his uncle. His dad was my uncle. 4 months later, for Thanksgiving, they come into town to have Thanksgiving with us. We're at the table, and 4 months later, and my cousin says, "Hey, Steve, remember that song we heard by the Del Vikings a couple times?" Yeah. I said, "Yeah." He said, "When you came back to Chicago, did you ever hear it?" I said, "Nope, nobody in Chicago ever played it." Oh. I said, "And I watched the American Bandstand, they never played it." He said, "Well, we have 2 stations in Kalamazoo now, they never played it." Oh. And I went to sleep that night pretty much in tears, saying, as long as I live, I will never hear that record ever again. And how many other great records am I missing that radio won't play? I said, when I get old and rich, I'm going to collect every record I can. And I've got half of that going on now. I won't tell you if it's the rich or the old part, but I got half of that going on. And I have collected maybe the best collection maybe in the world.
Yeah.
Some people think it is. And now I have heard records. When I moved here at 15, KFWB was the big station. And every hour they played a KFWB flashback.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple times they played a song. I thought I knew every song that really was out. I knew probably I missed a couple. And they'd play a song by Lloyd Price or or Clarence Frogman Henry, these R&B artists who didn't get much play on pop stations. Either because radio was prejudice or because they didn't really want to appeal to a black market, only the white market, and they really weren't prejudiced, but that's what they were aiming at. Who knows? But for whatever reason, all of a sudden I started hearing a couple more records that I had never heard before that were fantastic. And so I was lucky enough to be able to collect and be in situations where Dick Clark would become a friend, and he'd go in to take pictures with me and him in Billboard magazine and say, where does Dick Clark go when he needs records, and there'd be a picture. So radio stations who didn't know me would send records when they were cleaning out their basements and their garages and whatever. And I just got luckier and luckier and collected big time, and I was in the right place at the right time.
Very cool. Now, there was a couple of fires. Was it 2 years ago, I believe, or last year?
1 year ago, December 5th.
Oh, wow.
13 months ago.
Almost burnt down.
Lost 70 trees. We lost all the fences around our property. Our deck above our pool was on fire, and we gave up. Tried to evacuate. They wouldn't let us because the fire trucks were all blocking the driveway. And then the firemen came up 10 minutes later and saved the house.
Thank goodness.
We got very lucky. It was as good as gone. Next to our neighbor's house burned down. Across the street and 2 over burned down. We just got lucky.
And to explain the Radio Dream Lunch, how many people come out here every year? You know, you give them a tour too.
Yeah. It started 11 years ago, maybe 10, I guess it was, 10 years ago. And Art was in town, and he just invited 5 or 6, 7 friends. I was one of them, to have a lunch. And he said, that was the Dream Lunch. We should do it every year. And we thought next year we'd do it again, and he invited a few more people, and it was 15. Next year was 25. Next year was 40, and it just got bigger and bigger. And we've done it every year. 4 have been here at the house, and 6 were at restaurants. And it got to be where it was a lot of fun. A lot of people who have been in radio. Wink Martindale's here most every year. He's got the flu today, but a lot of people who've been in radio as DJs or doing TV shows and actors and people like that. So it's been a lot of fun.
Very cool. All right. I hope this is not the last one. Steve, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us.